Picture this. I'm on an oil rig in the middle of the ocean working 14-hour shifts to save money for retirement on my grandfather's Montana land, the only wealth my family ever had. 2 years later, I come home and there are 98 houses on my property. The HOA president pulls up in a white Lexus and tells me I'm the one trespassing. She fined me $300 for walking on my own land. What she didn't know, buried in my grandfather's 1948 deed was one sentence, 17 words, that made every house she built completely illegal. By the time I was done, she faced 40 years in prison, and I owned the whole development. Before I show you how one sentence destroyed a multi-million-dollar scam, tell me, what would you do? Drop it below. Where are you watching from? If you've ever fought an HOA, buckle up. Let's get into it. My name is Dalton Reeves. I'm 52 years old, and for the last 25 years I've worked as a petroleum engineer, mostly on offshore rigs in places most people can't even pronounce. The pay is incredible, but the work will break you if you let it. 14-hour shifts in 100-degree heat, living in a metal box in the middle of the ocean, away from everything and everyone you love. But I had a plan. I was going to do this until I turned 55, bank every dollar I could, then retire to the land my grandfather left me and live the rest of my life in peace. That was the plan. My grandfather, Mercer Reeves, died 14 months before all of this started. He was 89 years old, lived his entire life on that land. 200 acres of Montana grassland about 15 miles outside Billings. He bought it in 1948 with money he saved from working in the copper mines. It wasn't much, but it was ours. I spent every summer there as a kid. I can still smell the sagebrush after it rains, that sharp, clean smell that makes you feel like you're breathing for the first time. I remember the sound of the barn door creaking open in the morning, and the way my grandfather's calloused hands felt when he taught me to tie a bowline knot. That land was more than property to me. It was the only piece of my family's history that survived. When Mercer died, I was on a rig off the coast of Equatorial Guinea. The internet was terrible, maybe 20 minutes a day when the satellite was working. I got the news from a lawyer's email that took 3 days to download. By the time I could arrange leave and get back to the States, the funeral was over. I handled what I could remotely, signed the will paperwork, set up auto pay for the property taxes from Mercer's bank account, made sure everything was locked down legally. Then I went back to finish my contract. 2 more years and I'd be done. 2 more years and I could go home. I landed in Billings on a Tuesday morning in October, rented a truck, and started the drive out to the property. I had the windows down, and for the first time in 2 years I felt like I could actually breathe. Then, about 2 miles from the turnoff, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Street lamps. Brand new black metal street lamps lining a road that didn't exist when I left. Then I saw the sign, Ridgecrest Estates, a planned community. I told myself maybe it was nearby. Maybe they built it on the adjacent land. But when I got to where the gate should have been, the old wooden gate my grandfather built in 1953, it was gone. In its place were these massive stone pillars with a wrought iron arch that said Ridgecrest HOA Private Property. And past that, rows and rows of identical houses, beige siding, black shutters, 2 stories, perfect lawns. I counted them later. 98 houses, on my land. I pulled up to the pillars, and a young security guard stepped out of a little booth. He looked bored, like he'd done this 1,000 times. I rolled down my window and he said, "Resident or guest?" I just stared at him. "Neither," I said. "I own this land." He actually laughed. Then he got on his radio and said something I couldn't hear. 5 minutes later, a white Lexus SUV came screaming up the road and skidded to a stop. The door opened and out stepped this woman, platinum blonde hair in a perfect bob, athleisure outfit that probably cost more than my truck, fake tan, teeth so white they almost glowed. She walked up to my window and smiled, but it was the kind of smile that doesn't reach your eyes. "Sir," she said in this voice that was sweet and condescending at the same time, "I don't know what scam you're trying to pull, but this is a legal residential development. We have permits, deeds, everything. If you don't leave, I'm calling the sheriff." I took a breath. My grandfather, Mercer Reeves, owned this land. I inherited it. I have the deed. She laughed, high-pitched, brittle, like glass breaking. "That deed is worthless," she said. "This land was legally purchased from the county in a tax foreclosure auction 18 months ago. We did our due diligence. You lost it. Now leave, or I'll have you arrested for trespassing." Her name was Priscilla Van Dorn, and she had no idea what she'd just started. I didn't argue with her. There's no point arguing with someone who thinks they've already won. I just turned the truck around and drove back into town. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, not from fear, from rage. But I'm 52 years old and I've worked on oil rigs with men who would kill you over a poker game. I learned a long time ago that the guy who stays calm wins. So I stayed calm. First stop, the county recorder's office in Billings. It's this old brick building downtown that smells like dust and old paper. I walked up to the counter and this older woman, maybe 65, glasses on a chain, looked up at me. "Help you, hun?" "I need to pull records on a property," I said. 200 acres, rural route outside town, original deed under Mercer Reeves. She typed into her computer for a minute, then frowned. "Oh," she said. "This one's complicated." She printed out a stack of papers and spread them on the counter. And there it was, clear as day. My grandfather's deed, recorded in 1948. Clean chain of title, no liens, no problems. But then, 18 months ago, the county issued a tax foreclosure notice. Apparently my grandfather hadn't paid property taxes for 3 consecutive years, which was impossible because Mercer paid his taxes the same day every year, January 15th, like clockwork. "Can I see the tax bills?" I asked. She pulled them up, and that's when I saw it. The bills had been mailed to the wrong address. Not even close to the right address. The rural route number was completely wrong, like someone transposed 2 digits. The foreclosure notice was published in the legal section of the newspaper, which is required by law. But I was overseas, and Mercer was dead. Nobody saw it. The property went to auction, sold to something called Ridgecrest Development LLC for $47,000 for 200 acres of land that was worth at least $1 million. I felt sick. "Who was the buyer's agent?" I asked. The clerk looked at the signature line. "Bryn Kelsey." Then she said, almost as an afterthought, "Oh, Bryn married the lead county commissioner last year. Small world, right?" And that's when I knew. This wasn't bad luck. This wasn't a clerical error. Someone had been watching for an opportunity. But here's the thing about Montana property law that most people don't know. Even if the county legally forecloses on your land, you have something called a redemption period. Depending on the type of property, you have anywhere from 1 to 2 years to reclaim it by paying back the taxes, plus the auction price, plus interest and penalties. I pulled up the statute on my phone right there in the recorder's office. I still had time. Barely. I had 14 months since the auction. The redemption window for non-agricultural residential was 24 months. I had 10 months left. I called a lawyer that afternoon. His name was Leopold Crane, Leo for short. His office was above a pawn shop on the edge of downtown, and when I walked in it smelled like burnt coffee and stale cigarette smoke, even though I'm pretty sure smoking in offices has been illegal for 20 years. Leo was 61, looked 70, wearing a suit that might have fit him 30 pounds ago. But when I told him my story, his eyes got sharp. "You want to fight an HOA in the county?" he said. "Son, I like your optimism. This is going to be expensive." "How expensive?" $70,000, give or take. That's the back taxes, the auction price, interest, penalties, and my fee. I had it. Barely. I'd been saving for 25 years. I emptied my savings account and took a loan against my 401k. It hurt, but I didn't care. This was my land. 3 days later, Leo filed the redemption paperwork with the county. By law, they had to notify Ridgecrest LLC that I was reclaiming the property. I knew what was coming next. I just didn't know how fast it would happen. 48 hours after we filed, someone knocked on my motel room door. I was staying at this cheap place on the edge of town. Budget in, $39 a night, smells like disinfectant and sadness. I opened the door, and there she was, Priscilla. But this time, she had her teenage son with her, holding up an iPhone, filming me. "This man," she said, loud enough for the camera and anyone nearby to hear, "is trying to steal our homes." 98 families live in Ridgecrest. Teachers, nurses, retirees, people who saved their whole lives to buy a home, and he's trying to exploit a legal technicality to take it all away. People were coming out of their rooms now, staring. The motel manager came over. "Sir," he said to me, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We can't have this kind of trouble here." I looked at Priscilla. She was smiling. I packed my truck and left. But as I was loading the last box, this young woman, late 20s, wearing nurse scrubs, approached me quietly. "My name is Shauna," she said. "I live in Ridgecrest, Unit 34. Most of us didn't know about any of this." Priscilla told us the land purchase was completely legitimate. She looked scared. "If you win, what happens to us? To our mortgages?" And right then I realized something important. The people living in those houses? They were victims too. This wasn't their fault. It was hers. That night, Leo called me. I'd moved to a different motel across town. This one was worse, but at least Priscilla didn't know where I was yet. "We have a problem," Leo said. "Ridgecrest just filed an emergency injunction to block your redemption. There's a hearing in 72 hours. Can they do that?" "They can try. Their argument is that letting you reclaim the land would cause irreparable harm to 98 innocent homeowners. They're going to make you look like the villain." "Who's the judge?" "Harold Pittman." There was a pause. "He goes to the same country club as Garrett Van Dorn." "Who's Garrett Van Dorn?" "Priscilla's husband. He owns Ridgecrest Development LLC. Of course he does." The hearing was on a Friday morning. I couldn't sleep for 2 nights before. I kept thinking about my grandfather, about how hard he worked for that land, about how he trusted the system to protect it. The system failed him, but maybe it wouldn't fail me. The courtroom was old, wood paneling, high ceilings, that specific smell of floor wax and old law books. When I walked in, the gallery was packed. Priscilla had bussed in about 40 Ridgecrest homeowners. They sat there in their nice clothes, arms crossed, glaring at me like I was the one who'd done something wrong. Priscilla sat in the front row wearing pearls and this smug expression that made me want to scream. Their attorney was this guy named Marcus Treadwell. Slick suit, probably $800 an hour. Flew in from Denver just for this. He had a PowerPoint presentation ready. Photos of families, kids having birthday parties in Ridgecrest backyards, testimonials from residents about how much they loved their homes. Judge Pittman nodded along, looking sympathetic. Then it was our turn. Leo put me on the stand. He asked me about my grandfather, about the land, about being overseas when Mercer died. I told the truth. I told them about working 14-hour shifts on an oil rig to save money so I could retire on that land. I told them about the mailing error, about the tax bills going to the wrong address. Treadwell stood up for cross-examination. He was good, I'll give him that. "Mr. Reeves," he said, "you didn't check on your grandfather's affairs for 2 years. I was on an oil rig in Equatorial Guinea. We had satellite internet for maybe 20 minutes a day. But you could have hired someone to manage the property. You could have checked the tax records remotely. You chose not to." I looked right at him. "I was working 14-hour shifts in 100-degree heat to save money so I could come home to that land. My grandfather died alone because I wasn't there. Don't lecture me about responsibility." The gallery went quiet. Even Pittman looked uncomfortable. Then Leo dropped the bomb. He introduced a stack of emails into evidence, emails between Bryn Kelsey, the buyer's agent, and the county tax assessor. We'd gotten them through a public records request. In one email, dated 19 months ago, 2 weeks before my grandfather died, Bryn wrote, "Are there any large parcels at risk of foreclosure due to mailing issues? I have a client who's very interested." The tax assessor responded with a list. Mercer's property was on it. Leo looked at the judge. "Your Honor, this wasn't a neutral foreclosure. Mrs. Kelsey, who's married to a county commissioner, actively hunted for vulnerable properties. She knew about the mailing error. She tipped off Ridgecrest LLC. That's conspiracy to defraud." Treadwell jumped up. "Objection. That's pure speculation. There's no evidence Ridgecrest knew about any mailing error." Leo smiled. "Then let's put Mr. and Mrs. Van Dorn under oath and ask them." Judge Pittman looked like he'd just swallowed something sour. He was friends with the commissioner. This was getting messy. He cleared his throat. "I'm ordering a 30-day continuance for depositions. We'll reconvene after that." Priscilla's face went white. As we walked out of the courthouse, she was waiting on the steps. She got right in my face, close enough that I could smell her perfume, this overpowering synthetic vanilla that made my eyes water. "You're going to regret this," she hissed. "I will bury you." I just looked at her. "You're welcome to try." But she wasn't done. Over the next week, Ridgecrest's HOA website suddenly featured a community alert with my photo, an unflattering DMV picture labeled "Land Grabber Threatens Your Home." A Facebook group called Billings Family Watch started posting about me. Hundreds of comments calling me a con artist, a scammer, a heartless monster trying to evict families. Someone made flyers with my face on them and stuck them on car windshields all over downtown Billings. "Stop Dalton Reeves, protect Ridgecrest." My photo got spray painted on a sheet of plywood and planted in a ditch by the highway. I was getting death threats in my email. But then something unexpected happened. Shauna, the nurse from Ridgecrest, called Leo's office and asked to meet with me. We met at a diner on the edge of town. Vinyl booths, smell of frying onions, waitress who looked like she'd been working there since 1987. Shauna looked nervous. I've been talking to other homeowners, she said quietly. A lot of people are furious at Priscilla for hiding all this. We bought these homes in good faith. We had no idea the title was questionable. If I win, I said, I don't know what happens to you. Legally, I mean. That's the honest truth. She nodded. I know. But here's the thing. Priscilla's been stealing from us too. She slid a manila folder across the table. I worked night shifts at the hospital. Last week I couldn't sleep, so I went to the HOA office to grab some paperwork. Priscilla forgot to lock her computer. I found these. Inside were HOA budget reports, and the numbers didn't add up. The deposition started 2 weeks later. Leo went after Garrett Van Dorn first. We met in this sterile conference room in a law office downtown. Glass table, cold LED lights, everything designed to make you uncomfortable. Garrett showed up in an expensive suit, but he looked tired, like he hadn't been sleeping. He was 50-something, slicked back hair, the kind of guy who probably played golf every weekend and called it networking. Leo started slow. Basic questions about how Ridgecrest LLC was formed, how they found the property, standard stuff. Then he pivoted. Mr. Van Dorn, when did you first learn about the Reeves property being available? At the auction, Garrett said. We monitor county auctions regularly. It's part of our business model. And who told you about this particular auction? Garrett hesitated. Just for a second, but I caught it. I believe it was our agent, Bryn Kelsey. Did Mrs. Kelsey mention anything about the property owner being deceased? Or about a mailing error with the tax bills? I don't recall. Leo slid a document across the table. These are phone records. 3 calls between you and Mrs. Kelsey in the week before the auction. One of them lasted 42 minutes. You don't recall what you discussed? Garrett's jaw tightened. We discuss a lot of properties. I can't remember every conversation. Then Leo asked the question that changed everything. Mr. Van Dorn, how did you build 98 homes in only 14 months? Garrett blinked. We have an efficient construction process. Let me rephrase. According to county records, you submitted building permit applications 6 weeks before the foreclosure auction. You broke ground before you even owned the land. How is that possible? The room went silent. Garrett looked at his attorney. His attorney looked at the ceiling. We were confident in our bid, Garrett finally said. That's not business confidence, Leo said. That's inside knowledge. You knew you were going to win that auction before it even happened. Priscilla's deposition was 3 days later. Same conference room, same cold lights. But Priscilla was different than her husband. She showed up ready for a fight. Full makeup, tailored blazer, pearl necklace. She thought she could charm her way through this. She was wrong. Leo started with the basics, then went for the throat. Mrs. Van Dorn, did you know the prior owner of the Ridgecrest property never received tax notices? I'm not responsible for county clerical errors. That's not what I asked. Did you know about the mailing error before the auction? She paused. Just 1 second. But on a deposition transcript, that pause is everything. I don't recall. Leo pulled out more phone records. You received 3 calls from Bryn Kelsey the week before the auction. What did you discuss? I don't remember. That was 18 months ago. Mrs. Van Dorn, let me ask you about something else. In the past 18 months, how much money has Ridgecrest HOA collected in dues? I'd have to check the records. I have them here. $340,000. Can you explain where that money went? Priscilla's face tightened. Landscaping, legal fees, administrative costs, it's all in the annual report. Your annual report lists $180,000 for landscaping. I drove through Ridgecrest yesterday. You have some sod and a few trees. That's not $180,000 worth of landscaping. We hired premium contractors. Leo slid another document across the table. These are bank statements. $120,000 in checks written to something called VD Consulting LLC. That's a shell company owned by your husband. You've been funneling HOA dues to your husband's personal accounts. Priscilla's attorney put his hand on her arm, but she shook him off. That was for legitimate consulting services. What services? Business consulting, strategic planning. For an HOA? Leo leaned forward. Mrs. Van Dorn, you've been stealing from the very people you claim to represent. And you have the nerve to call my client a thief. Priscilla stood up. This deposition is over. She grabbed her purse and walked out. Her attorney stayed behind, looking miserable. That night, Priscilla called an emergency HOA meeting. It was held in the Ridgecrest Community Center, this bland, echoey room with folding chairs and fluorescent lights. About 60 homeowners showed up. I wasn't invited, obviously, but Shauna was there. She told me everything. Priscilla stood at the front with a microphone, and she was vibrating with rage. "Dalton Reeves is trying to destroy everything we've built here," she said. "He's using lies and manipulation to turn you against me. But I want you to know, I have fought for this community every single day. Everything I've done has been for you." A middle-aged man in the back, retired teacher, Shauna said his name was Curtis, stood up. "Is it true the land sale is being investigated for fraud?" Priscilla's face went red. "That's a vicious rumor started by Reeves." Curtis pulled out a piece of paper. "I filed a Freedom of Information Act request with the county. I have copies of the emails between Bryn Kelsey and the tax assessor. You knew the owner never got the tax bills. You knew it was fraud." The room erupted, people shouting, demanding answers. Priscilla tried to regain control, but it was too late. Shauna stood up. "I also have copies of the HOA budget. Can you explain why your husband's company received $120,000 in payments?" Priscilla grabbed the microphone. "Fine. You want the truth? That land was wasted on some old hermit who didn't even live on it. We turned it into something valuable, Holmes Community? So what if we bent a few rules, we made something out of nothing?" Dead silence. Then someone in the back said, "You just admitted to fraud. On camera." Priscilla turned around. A guy in the corner, tech worker younger than most residents, was holding up his phone. He'd been live streaming the whole meeting to a private Facebook group. 150 people had just watched her confession. Priscilla went pale. Her husband, Garrett, who'd been sitting in the corner the whole time, stood up and grabbed her arm. "We're leaving. Now." They rushed out. The door slammed behind them. And for the first time since this whole nightmare started, I thought maybe, just maybe, I was going to win. The next morning, Leo called me at 7 a.m. I was staying at yet another motel. This one had a broken air conditioner and stains on the ceiling I didn't want to think about. But at least nobody had found me yet. "Get to my office," Leo said. "Now." Ingrid found something. Ingrid was Leo's paralegal, sharp woman in her late 20s, went to law school at night while working full-time. When I got to the office, she had documents spread across every available surface. She looked like she hadn't slept. "I was doing title research," she said, "going back further than usual, and I found something in your grandfather's original 1948 deed. Look at this clause." She pointed to a paragraph near the bottom of the deed. The language was old-fashioned, formal, the kind of legal writing they don't use anymore. It said, "Said land shall revert to Reeves family heirs if ever used for residential subdivision, without written consent of grantor's descendants." I read it 3 times. "What does that mean?" Leo was grinning. Actually grinning, which I'd never seen him do before. "It means your grandfather put a condition on the land when he bought it. If anyone ever tried to turn it into a housing development without permission from his family, without permission from you, the land automatically reverts back to the Reeves family. It's called a reverter clause." "So even if the county legally foreclosed—" "It doesn't matter," Leo interrupted. "The second Ridgecrest started building houses. The reverter clause triggered. The land came back to you automatically. They've been trespassing this entire time." I sat down. My hands were shaking. "Every house is illegal?" "Every single one." Ingrid pulled up another document. "And here's the beautiful part. I checked Ridgecrest's title insurance policy. They bought the cheapest policy available. It explicitly excludes coverage for reverter clauses. It's right here in the fine print. When you win, they can't even file an insurance claim to recoup their losses. They're completely exposed." Leo leaned back in his chair. "Dalton, you don't need redemption rights anymore. You already own the land. You've owned it since the day they poured the first foundation. We just need to file a quiet title action and let a judge confirm it." "How long will that take? In Montana, with evidence this clear? Maybe 60 days? I thought about Priscilla's face when she found out. I thought about Garrett, who'd sunk millions into this development thinking he was safe. And I thought about the 98 families who had no idea they were living in houses built on illegally obtained land. "What happens to the homeowners?" I asked. Leo shrugged. "Legally? They're your tenants now. You could evict them all if you wanted to. I don't want that. Then you negotiate. You have all the leverage, Dalton. You decide what happens next." That afternoon, Leo sent a formal legal notice to Ridgecrest LLC, citing the reverter clause and informing them that they had no legal claim to the property. Within 2 hours, Priscilla called her attorney. Within 4 hours, her attorney quit. Marcus Treadwell, the expensive Denver lawyer, sent Leo an email that just said, "I advised my clients to read the full title report. They chose not to. I'm withdrawing from representation. Good luck to you." Priscilla showed up at my new motel that evening. I don't know how she found me. Maybe she'd hired a private investigator. Maybe she'd just been driving around looking for my truck. She knocked on the door, and when I opened it, she looked like she'd been crying. No makeup, hair in a messy ponytail. This was the first time I'd seen her without the armor. "Please," she said, her voice cracked. "We put everything into this, our savings, our investments, everything. Garrett's other projects are failing. If you do this, we'll lose our house. We'll be bankrupt. We'll lose everything." I looked at her for a long moment. "You tried to steal my land," I said quietly. "You lied to 98 families. You embezzled their money. You sent me death threats. You spray-painted my face on a billboard, and now you want mercy?" She didn't have an answer. I closed the door. The next morning, I found a note taped to my windshield. Handwritten shaky letters. "Drop this, or you'll regret it. Last warning." I knew the handwriting. I'd seen it on HOA memos Shauna had shown me. It was Priscilla's. I took a photo of the note and sent it to Leo. He forwarded it to the county prosecutor. Threatening a witness is a crime. Priscilla had just made everything worse. Leo, his forensic accountant Raymond, and I met in Leo's office the next day to plan our strategy. Raymond was this 67-year-old retired IRS agent who did side work investigating financial fraud. He looked like somebody's grandfather, but he could find hidden money like a bloodhound. "Here's what we know," Leo said, spreading documents across his desk. "The reverter clause gives Dalton automatic ownership. That's the legal foundation. But we have 3 separate paths forward here, and we need to be smart about which ones we take." He drew a diagram on his whiteboard. Path 1, legal. We file a quiet title action. The court confirms Dalton owns the land. That takes about 60 days. Path 2, criminal. We refer the embezzlement evidence to the county prosecutor. Raymond found $120,000 that Priscilla funneled to her husband's shell company. That's theft. We also have the threatening note, which is witness intimidation. Path 3, community. We negotiate directly with the homeowners, offer them a fair deal so they're not caught in the crossfire. I looked at the board. We do all 3. Raymond nodded. Smart. Hit them from every angle. But you need to understand something, Dalton. When you file that quiet title action, Priscilla and Garrett are going to panic. Cornered animals bite. You need to be ready for that. We spent the next week building the case. Let me explain how the reverter clause works, because this is important and most people don't know about it. In old property law, we're talking 1940s, 50s, even earlier, landowners sometimes put conditions on deeds when they sold property. These conditions were meant to control how the land could be used in the future. A reverter clause basically says, you can own this land, but if you break these rules, ownership automatically reverts to the original family. In my grandfather's case, the rule was simple. No residential subdivision without family consent. The moment Ridgecrest started building houses, they violated that condition. Ownership snapped back to me like a rubber band. The key word here is automatic. They didn't need to know about the clause. It didn't matter if they'd done due diligence. The second they broke the condition, they lost the land, period. Here's the lesson. If you're ever buying property, pay for a comprehensive title search, not the cheap version. Get every deed, every restriction, every easement going back at least 100 years. Because buried in some old piece of paper might be a clause that makes your entire investment worthless. While Leo prepared the legal filings, Raymond and I worked on documenting the embezzlement. He traced every dollar that went through the HOA accounts. It was worse than we thought. Priscilla hadn't just stolen $120,000, she'd stolen closer to $180,000. The fake landscaping bills, the inflated legal fees that went to a law firm that didn't exist, the administrative costs that were actually payments to a spa in Scottsdale where Priscilla took quarterly trips. Raymond built a spreadsheet showing every fraudulent transaction, every fake invoice, every shell company payment. It was airtight. Meanwhile, I reached out to the homeowners. Shauna helped me organize a meeting at the VFW hall, this old wood-paneled building that smelled like stale beer and lemon furniture polish. About 50 Ridgecrest residents showed up. I stood at the front of the room and told them the truth. I never wanted to hurt any of you, I said. You bought homes in good faith. You're victims in this too. But legally, right now, you're living on land that belongs to me. So here's what I'm proposing. I explained the community land trust model. In simple terms, you own your house, but you lease the land underneath it from the trust. The lease is long-term, 30 years. and the rent is affordable, way below market rate. In this case, I was proposing $300 a month. For comparison, market rate land lease in that area would be $600-700 minimum. Why would you do that? One woman asked. She was a teacher, mid-40s, looked exhausted. Because my grandfather believed land should serve people, not enrich developers. And because Priscilla's scheme screwed all of us, this is how we make it right. Another man stood up, older guy, veteran by the look of him. His name was Curtis, the same one who'd called out Priscilla at the meeting. My father lost his farm to a bank technicality in the 1980s, Curtis said. I know what it's like to lose everything because someone exploited a loophole. What you're offering us? That's fair. That's more than fair. By the end of the meeting, 62 homeowners had signed a letter supporting my plan. We also brought in Dr. Yolanda Park, an environmental lawyer who specialized in community land trusts. She helped us draft the trust charter, making sure it complied with Montana nonprofit law. She worked pro bono because she believed in the model. Yolanda also found something interesting in Ridgecrest's original development plan, the one they'd submitted to the county for approval. They'd promised to preserve 40 acres as open space for environmental reasons, but they'd paved over it and built houses anyway. Another violation. Another nail in their coffin. 2 weeks before the county planning board meeting, everything was ready. Legal filings prepared, evidence organized, community support locked in. All we needed now was the right moment to go public. Priscilla wasn't done fighting. The night before the planning board meeting, she called her own emergency HOA meeting. She sent an aggressive email to every Ridgecrest resident with the subject line, "Mandatory attendance, your homes are at risk." About 70 people showed up at the community center. Shauna went and recorded everything on her phone. Priscilla had set up the room theater style, rows of chairs facing a screen where she had a PowerPoint ready. She'd gone full armor again. Perfect makeup, tailored blazer, hairstyled like she was going on TV, but if you looked close, you could see the cracks. Her hands shook when she clicked the remote. The presentation was titled, "Protecting Our Investment, The Truth About Dalton Reeves." The slides were a mix of half-truths and outright lies. Slide 1. Reeves is using a legal loophole to steal land from hardworking families. Slide 2. He plans to evict everyone and sell to a commercial developer. Slide 3. His so-called land trust is a scam with no legal backing. Then she showed a photo of me at what looked like some kind of protest holding a sign, except I'd never been to any protest. It took me about 10 seconds of reverse image searching to figure out it was a stock photo she'd doctored. She was that desperate. A woman in the third row raised her hand. "Priscilla, can you address the $120,000 in unexplained payments to your husband's company?" Priscilla's smile froze. "That's been fully accounted for. It's in the annual report." A man stood up. Accountant, worked from home. Shauna told me his name was Mitchell. I read the annual report 3 times. Those payments aren't itemized. What were they actually for? Legal fees, mostly, Priscilla said quickly. We've had to defend against Reeves's frivolous lawsuits. Shauna stood up in the back. I have bank statements showing the checks went to a shell company, not a law firm. The company is registered to your husband. The room got quiet. You could hear the fluorescent lights humming. Then Curtis, the Marine veteran, stood up. He was holding a folder. I did some digging on my own, he said. Priscilla, you told us this land was purchased legitimately, but county records show the tax notices were sent to the wrong address, and there are emails, public records, showing that Bryn Kelsey, the buyer's agent, specifically asked about properties with mailing issues before the foreclosure happened. You knew the owner never got those tax bills. That's not a technicality. That's fraud. Priscilla's face went white. That's a lie. Reeves is paying people to... I'm a retired Marine, Curtis interrupted. Nobody pays me to lie. You lied to us. We trusted you, and you lied. Other people started pulling out their phones, Googling, finding articles. Someone found a local news blog with the headline, County Commissioner's Wife Under Investigation for Land Deal. The room started buzzing with conversation. People standing up, voices rising. Priscilla slammed her hand on the podium. This is a smear campaign. Reeves is manipulating you. Then explain the money, Shauna said loudly. Explain the shell company. Explain the emails. Explain why you started building houses 6 weeks before you even owned the land. Priscilla grabbed the microphone and something inside her snapped. Her voice got shrill, desperate. Fine, you want the truth? That land was wasted on some old hermit who didn't even live on it. We turned it into something valuable, homes, community, something that actually matters. So what if we bent a few rules? We made something out of nothing. The room went dead silent. Then someone in the back said, "You just admitted to fraud. On camera." Priscilla spun around. A younger guy, tech worker, early 30s, was holding up his phone. He'd been live streaming the entire meeting to a private Facebook group. 153 people had just watched her confession in real time. The color drained from Priscilla's face. She looked at the phone, then at the crowd, then at her husband. Garrett had been sitting in the corner the whole time, silent. Now he stood up, walked to Priscilla, and grabbed her arm hard enough that she winced. "We're leaving," he said through clenched teeth. "Now." They pushed through the crowd toward the exit. Someone booed. Someone else started clapping slowly, sarcastically. The door slammed behind them. After they left, Curtis walked to the front of the room. "I think we need to vote," he said. "Who here wants to hear Dalton Reeves's actual proposal before we make any decisions?" Every single hand went up. Shauna called me. I was parked 2 blocks away, expecting chaos. I got to the community center in 5 minutes. When I walked in, 70 people turned to look at me. I didn't have a PowerPoint. I didn't have slides. I just told them the truth. I explained the reverter clause. I explained my land trust plan. I showed them the draft lease agreements, the budget projections, the legal structure. I emphasized, I don't want revenge on you. You're victims too. I want revenge on the people who lied to all of us. The questions were tough but fair. People wanted to know about their mortgages, their equity, their property values. I answered everything honestly. By the end of the night, 64 homeowners signed a petition supporting my plan. Curtis shook my hand at the door. "My dad lost his farm to a bank technicality in the 80s, he said. "I know what it's like. You're doing the right thing." I walked outside into the cool night air. I could smell pine trees from somewhere nearby, hear crickets chirping. For the first time in months, I felt like maybe this would actually work. Then my phone rang. It was Leo. "Garrett just filed for bankruptcy protection," he said. "He's trying to shield his assets before your lawsuit hits. Can he do that?" "He can try, but bankruptcy won't protect him from criminal charges." The county planning board meeting was the next evening. The county building was this utilitarian concrete box with fluorescent lights and worn linoleum floors that squeaked when you walked. The meeting was scheduled for 6 p.m., and by 5:30 the parking lot was full. A local TV crew was setting up outside. Apparently it was a slow news week, and a corruption story was too good to pass up. Maritza Chen, a reporter from the Billings Gazette who'd been covering the story, stopped me on the sidewalk. "Mr. Reeves, is it true you're accusing the Van Dorns of embezzlement?" "I'm letting the evidence speak for itself," I said. Inside the meeting room, the 5 planning commissioners sat at a long table at the front. One of them was Walter Kelsey, Bryn's husband, the county commissioner whose wife had tipped off Ridgecrest about the foreclosure. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Item 7 on the agenda. Ridgecrest Estates Phase 2. Expansion, 40 residential lots. Preliminary approval request. Garrett Van Dorn appeared via Zoom. He claimed he was traveling for business, but everyone knew he was hiding. His face on the screen looked haggard, unshaven, bags under his eyes, wrinkled shirt. He presented his proposal in a flat, defeated voice. 40 more homes, infrastructure improvements, tax revenue for the county. When he finished, the board chair asked if there were any public comments. I stood up and walked to the microphone. "My name is Dalton Reeves," I said. "I'm the legal owner of the land currently occupied by Ridgecrest Estates. I'm here to inform the board that Phase 1 was built illegally, and Phase 2 should be rejected immediately." One of the commissioners, a woman in her 50s, neutral expression, leaned forward. "Those are serious accusations. What's your basis?" "I've submitted a 40-page brief to the county attorney, but I'll summarize. The original 1948 deed contains a reverter clause prohibiting residential subdivision without family consent. Ridgecrest Development LLC violated that clause. They also began construction before holding clear title, which suggests foreknowledge of the foreclosure outcome. Additionally, they've been embezzling HOA funds. And Bryn Kelsey, wife of Commissioner Kelsey, provided insider information to help Ridgecrest acquire the land through a fraudulent foreclosure process." The room erupted. Walter Kelsey stood up, his face red. "That's defamatory. I'll sue you for slander." I looked right at him. "Sue me with what money? Your wife is under criminal investigation." The board chair slammed her gavel. "Order! Everyone calm down." I pulled out my laptop and connected it to the room's projector. "I have evidence," I said. I played an audio recording, a phone call between Bryn Kelsey and Garrett Van Dorn from 19 months ago, discussing the Reeves parcel and how to expedite the foreclosure process. In the recording, Bryn mentioned talking to my contact at the assessor's office to make sure the notices go to the wrong address. The room went silent. You could hear the hum of the projector. Walter Kelsey stood up, grabbed his briefcase, and walked out. The TV cameras in the back swiveled to follow him. A reporter chased him into the hallway, shouting questions. He got in his car and drove away without saying a word. Then the doors burst open and Priscilla Van Dorn stormed in. She'd been watching the live stream from the parking lot. She was shaking with rage. "He's lying!" she screamed. "We did everything by the book, everything!" The board chair pointed her gavel at Priscilla. "Ma'am, you're out of order. Sit down or leave." Priscilla ignored her. She marched right up to where I was standing. "You've ruined us. We're bankrupt because of you. Our house, our savings, everything is gone." I looked at her calmly. "You ruined yourselves." Two sheriff's deputies who'd been standing by the door moved forward and escorted Priscilla to the hallway. Through the open door, we could see her crying, mascara running down her face, shouting incoherently. The TV cameras got all of it. Back in the meeting room, the board chair turned to the county attorney, who was sitting in the front row looking miserable. "Is there an active investigation?" The attorney cleared his throat. "I can confirm that our office, in coordination with the Montana Attorney General and the FBI, is reviewing allegations of fraud related to the Ridgecrest development. I cannot comment further on an ongoing investigation." "FBI?" one of the commissioners asked. The attorney nodded. "Ridgecrest Development LLC used federal small business loans, specifically PPP loans from the COVID relief program, to fund construction. They claimed the development was essential infrastructure. If those claims were fraudulent, that's a federal crime." The board voted unanimously to table the Phase 2 expansion indefinitely. Outside reporters swarmed me. Maritza from the Gazette asked, "What do you want to happen to the Van Dorns?" "I want justice for my grandfather and for the 98 families who were lied to. If that means prosecution, so be it." "Will you evict the homeowners?" "Absolutely not. I'm working with them to create a community land trust. They're staying. They've done nothing wrong." That night, a tech worker from Ridgecrest posted a 2-minute video clip to YouTube. My testimony, Priscilla's meltdown, Walter Kelsey fleeing. The title was HOA President's Multi-Million-Dollar Land Scam Exposed in Real Time. It got 400,000 views in 24 hours. CNN picked it up. Then it went fully viral. My phone didn't stop ringing for 3 days. 1 week after the planning board meeting, the Montana Attorney General's office called a press conference in Helena, the state capital. They sent me a formal invitation as victim's representative. I drove the 3 hours from Billings alone, listening to talk radio and trying not to think about what was coming. The press conference was held in a government building with marble floors and the state seal on the wall. There must have been 30 reporters there, cameras everywhere, that electric feeling in the air that comes right before something big happens. The Attorney General stepped up to the podium, older woman, gray hair, the kind of person who looked like she'd been a prosecutor for 40 years and didn't take nonsense from anyone. She shuffled her papers and began, "Good morning. Today we are announcing criminal charges in what we believe to be one of the most significant development fraud cases in Montana history. The defendants orchestrated a multi-year scheme to illegally acquire land, defraud homeowners, and profit from embezzled funds." She listed the charges. Garrett Van Dorn, 8 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of embezzlement, 2 counts of attempted bribery, 1 count of conspiracy to defraud. If convicted on all counts, he was looking at up to 40 years in federal prison. Priscilla Van Dorn, 5 counts of embezzlement, 1 count of conspiracy, 1 count of witness intimidation, up to 15 years. Bryn Kelsey, 4 counts of official misconduct, 2 counts of conspiracy. The Attorney General explained how Bryn had used her position and her husband's influence to identify vulnerable properties, then tipped off developers for a commission. She'd done it at least 4 other times before Ridgecrest. "This case represents a brazen abuse of public trust," the AG said. "Thanks to Mr. Reeves's persistence and cooperation, we've been able to hold these individuals accountable." Then she invited me to speak. I walked up to the podium, and the camera flashes made me squint. I'm not good at public speaking. I'm an engineer. I work with numbers and metal and concrete, not words and cameras. But I thought about my grandfather, and I found the words. "My grandfather taught me that land isn't just property," I said. "It's a promise to the future. The Van Dorns broke that promise. But the 98 families living in Ridgecrest didn't break anything. They deserve stability and fairness, and I'm committed to giving them that." I looked directly at the camera. "This case isn't about revenge. It's about making sure no one else loses their heritage to greed and corruption. A reporter raised her hand. Mr. Reeves, do you feel vindicated? I thought about that for a second. I'll feel vindicated when every family in Ridgecrest has a secure 30-year lease and the Van Dorns are behind bars. Until then, there's work to do. Then I said something I'd been thinking about for weeks. And to anyone else dealing with an HOA nightmare, document everything. Know your rights. Don't back down. Bullies rely on you giving up. Don't give them that satisfaction. The arrests happened the next day. Federal marshals picked up Garrett at his strip mall in Idaho, where he'd been hiding out. The perp walk footage was all over the news. Garrett in handcuffs, unshaven, photographers everywhere. Such a different image from the slick developer he'd pretended to be. Priscilla was arrested at her mother's house in Bozeman. She'd fled there after the planning board meeting. When the marshals showed up, she apparently locked herself in the bathroom and refused to come out for an hour. They had to threaten to break the door down. Bryn Kelsey turned herself in with her attorney and posted bail immediately. Family money. But her law license was suspended pending the outcome of the case. 2 weeks later, the court formally voided Ridgecrest LLC's title and declared me the legal owner via the reverter clause. I immediately established the Mercer Reeves Community Land Trust and transferred the 200 acres into it. I set up a board of directors, Curtis, Shauna, and 3 other homeowners who'd supported me from the beginning. All 98 families were offered 30-year ground leases at $300 a month. 96 of them signed within a week. The other 2 moved out voluntarily. They'd gotten job offers in other states, and we found new residents within a month. The homeowners organized a celebration at the community center. It was potluck style. People brought casseroles and desserts, and somebody's uncle played guitar. About 80 people showed up. Curtis proposed a toast. To Dalton, he said, raising a beer. And to fighting for what's right, even when it's hard. People cheered and clinked glasses. I felt uncomfortable with all the attention. I'm just a guy who wanted his land back, I said. You all did the real work, standing up to Priscilla, sharing evidence, trusting me when you had no reason to. This is your victory. Shauna came up to me near the end of the night. She was holding a wrapped package. We got you something, she said. I opened it. Inside was a framed photograph, an old picture of my grandfather on horseback, probably from the 1960s. They'd overlaid it with an outline of the 200 acres and added text, in honor of Mercer Reeves. His legacy lives on. I had to walk outside for a minute because I couldn't let them see me cry. That was a year ago. A lot has changed since then. The Mercer Reeves Community Land Trust is thriving. We're using the surplus income from the ground leases, about $200,000 a year after expenses, to fund 3 initiatives. First, scholarships. We give $50,000 a year to rural Montana kids pursuing degrees in trades or agriculture. We call them the Mercer Reeves Legacy Scholarships. Last year, we sent 8 kids to college who couldn't have afforded it otherwise. Second, land preservation. Remember that 40-acre parcel Priscilla wanted to develop for Phase 2? We bought it. Turned it into a public park with hiking trails, picnic areas, and protected wetlands. There are deer there now, and last spring someone spotted a family of foxes. My grandfather would have loved that. Third, community solar. We designated 10 acres for solar panels. The electricity goes back to Ridgecrest residents and cuts their power bills by about 30%. Turns out when you actually use HOA money for the community instead of stealing it, you can do some pretty incredible things. As for me, I built a small cabin on the edge of the preserved land. Off-grid, solar panels, rainwater collection, the whole sustainable setup my grandfather always talked about but never got around to building. I live there part of the year. The rest of the time I consult for other community land trusts around the country. Turns out there are a lot of people trying to build affordable housing, and my story opened doors. I get calls from Oregon, Vermont, North Carolina, places I've never been. I help them set up the legal structures, avoid the pitfalls, deal with the opposition. It's good work. I even started dating someone. Met her at a land conservation conference in Missoula. She's a botanist, studies native grasses. We take it slow. But she understands why the land matters, and that's important to me. Ridgecrest itself has completely transformed. The families there formed this incredibly tight-knit community. Shared trauma does that sometimes, bonds people together. They have an annual festival now, every August. They call it Mercer Fest. Live music, barbecue, kids running around, the whole thing. It's become one of the biggest community events in the county. Several families started small businesses using trust resources. There's a community garden co-op that sells vegetables at the farmer's market, a woodworking workshop in one of the common area garages, a farm-to-table food truck that parks downtown on weekends. National media picked up the story. The New York Times did a feature called "How One Man Beat an HOA and Built a Community." CNN sent a crew out to film the neighborhood. Ridgecrest became this model for affordable housing innovation, proof that there's a better way to do things. Other HOA abuse victims started reaching out to me, asking for advice. I got so many messages that I created a free online guide, How to Fight HOA Abuse, Legal Strategies and Resources. It's been downloaded more than 50,000 times. I get emails from people all over the country telling me their stories, asking questions, sometimes just saying thank you for proving it's possible to win. The Montana legislature even passed a bill requiring stricter oversight of HOA finances. They call it the Ridgecrest Reform Act. Every HOA in the state now has to file annual financial reports with the county, and board members can be held personally liable for embezzlement. It won't stop every corrupt HOA, but it's a start. As for the Van Dorns, Garrett pleaded guilty to avoid trial. He got 12 years in federal prison and was ordered to pay $2.3 million in restitution. He'll be 70 before he gets out. Priscilla pleaded guilty to embezzlement and got 4 years. She's also permanently banned from serving in any HOA leadership position anywhere in the country. Bryn Kelsey lost her law license and got probation because she cooperated with prosecutors. Last I heard, she and Walter were divorced. A few weeks ago, Curtis called me. We were having coffee at that same diner where I'd met with Shauna, the one with the vinyl booths and the smell of frying onions. "My cousin in Wyoming has a problem," he said. "HOA trying to foreclose on her ranch because her fence is the wrong color. She's about to lose everything." I smiled. "Tell her to call me." Because here's what I learned from all this. The system is broken. It favors the powerful, the connected, the people who know how to exploit the loopholes. But it's not unbeatable. You just have to be willing to fight, and you have to be smarter than they are. So, if you're out there dealing with your own HOA nightmare, if you're being fined for ridiculous violations, if you're watching corrupt board members steal your money, if you feel powerless, I want you to know something. You're not powerless. Document everything. Get copies of every email, every violation notice, every financial report. Know your state's laws. Find a lawyer who's willing to fight. Build alliances with your neighbors. And whatever you do, don't give up. Because they're counting on you giving up. That's how they win. My grandfather spent 70 years protecting that land. I spent 18 months fighting for it. And now 98 families have homes they can actually afford. Kids are going to college who wouldn't have otherwise. And 200 acres of Montana grassland will stay protected forever. Yeah, it was worth it. So here's what I need from you. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever dealt with an HOA that abused its power? What happened? Let's shine a light on these stories. And if you want to see more stories like this, underdogs beating corrupt systems, justice actually being served, hit that subscribe button. Because I'm not done telling these stories. Not even close. Thanks for watching. And remember, fight back.